It's 7 p.m. Tuesday, June 4th, here in Seoul.
These are the top stories at this hour. The bodies of 2 more South Koreans have been found in Hungary after last Wednesday's tourist boat sinking, bringing the total death toll to 9. Divers worked frantically to find the 19 others still missing, with plans to search inside the ill-fated boat.
South Korea's first quarter GDP growth falls faster than expected as exports and investments continue to dwindle.
President Moon Jae-in thanks the country's patriots and veterans ahead of the June 6th Memorial Day, vowing more support for them.
And LA Dodgers pitcher Jaein is named National League Pitcher of the Month, becoming the first South Korean in over 20 years to get the award. NEWSCENTER begins now. Good evening and welcome to Arirang News Center, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Arirang.
And I'm Han-daeun. Welcome to our program. We start with the latest from Hungary, where a boat carrying dozens of South Korean tourists sank in the Danube last Wednesday. Search teams recovered 2 bodies on Monday, raising the official death toll now to 9, with 19 others still missing.
That's right. And let's get the latest from our Kim Mo-gyun, who is on the line for us. Mo-gyun, tell us what you're hearing.
Sure. Well, on Monday afternoon local times, the South Korean search team in Hungary recovered a female body from the left side stern of the boat. The Hungarian team first spotted the body, and the South Korean divers went down to get it, and it was found to be of a Korean woman in her 50s. Earlier during the morning hours, the search team recovered another body, which was found to be of a Korean man who is presumed to have been in his 60s. His body was found on the banks of the Danube, 102 kilometers south of the accident site. A local resident first reported the body to the police, and the South Korean search team quickly dispatched divers to recover it. The 2 bodies have been now sent to a local university for examination.
Right, Mo-gyun. So it's around noon there in Hungary. How is the investigation going so far?
Well, the Korean team and the Hungarian authorities held a meeting a few hours ago to discuss the logistics of the search and the potential dangers involved. After the meeting, the South Korean Defense Attaché Song Soon-gun told reporters that the 2 sides agreed to continue with the underwater search operations until the boat gets salvaged. However, he said that the 2 were not able to reach an agreement on holding inspections inside the boat due to the opposition of Hungarian authorities over safety concerns. Now, regarding salvage operations, he said that it could be done as early as Thursday local time.
The crane is expected to arrive here on Thursday. We are planning to use the crane and ropes to lift the boat, but we are still discussing the details. So we will be able to begin salvage operations as early as Thursday afternoon, and if late, around Friday or Saturday.
Alongside search efforts, the survivors will be giving testimony about the details of the incident, and the family members of the victims will visit a local hospital to confirm the identity of the bodies in the next few hours. Back to you guys.
Our Kim Mo-gyun for us tonight. Thank you, Mo-gyun. Keep us posted throughout this evening. Now let's connect with Zoltan Shiboshegi, a foreign affairs correspondent at Euronews Hungary, to hear more about the latest search and recovery efforts straight from the Danube River in Budapest. Zoltan, thank you for joining us.
Good evening again.
Hungarian authorities have said they discovered the bodies of 2 victims on Monday, both of them South Koreans. I believe you were at the presser when the police made the announcement. What else have you learned?
Actually, the biggest surprise was that they found the body more than 100 kilometers away from Budapest. So it means that they really need to search during the whole period of the Danube in Hungary and also the Serbian part. The mission has 2 opportunities. There was a press conference of the anti-terror center, and the leader of the organization told that they have 2 parallel programs and plans. The first is that they start to save the corpse underwater with the divers one by one and take it to the ground. The second is that of course, they're going to lift the whole ship. But it's quite difficult because they really try to avoid to break apart of the body of the ship. And that's why the divers are searching now. You can see behind me this pontoon bridge. There is a scale. There they are going down into the water. So now they are searching for the strong points of the boat where they can grab it and lift it to the surface. But it's extremely difficult and it's extremely dangerous. For example, the divers can't see anything under the water. It's 12 degrees, so it's quite cold. And for example, in the first day, when they finally could leave the pontoon bridge and start to make the rescue close to the boat, one of the divers had an accident also. One of the holding rope just cracked in one of the bays. So it was quite dangerous. The other what is important, that for save the corpse, one by one, they need to enter to the body of the boat, what is extremely, extremely dangerous. And that's why what they try to avoid to save the life of the divers also.
Now, this came after days of unfavorable river conditions that hampered rescue operations. How are the conditions now?
Okay, what we need to understand that the level of the water is a little bit more than 5 meters, but the boat is 9 meters under the surface. So it's really, really the deepest point of the river. We need cranes, kind of a crane boat. Also the leader, János Hajdu of the anti-terrorist organization, he mentioned that all the tools, all the equipment we have in this region, also we got help from Austria, from Czech Republic, from Norway. We got divers and sonars, but we are missing one really important thing. The crane, the boat crane of Adam Clark, what can lift 200 tons under the water. So it would be the only one solution, but because of the high tide, it can't cross under the bridges in Budapest. So we need to wait maybe days, maybe weeks, but still they are working in different other plans also.
Zoltan, you've briefly mentioned this already, but we heard that South Korean and Hungarian authorities would determine whether to continue underwater searches on Tuesday or work towards salvaging the boat. Do you have any information about that, how they plan to do it, and a timeline, perhaps?
Actually, also, Haidu told that we can't say that we have a timeline, a strict timeline. Of course, the most important is now to do it as fast as we can. But it's not because of the weather conditions, because you can see behind me that now the weather is much better. There's no rain. It's quite kind of clear. But the streams are extremely strong underwater. So they need to recover the boat, recover the bodies without having a danger for the divers. So it's a really good question now. For example, one of the corpse, what they found underwater here in Budapest behind me, it was found by the Hungarian divers. It was signed by the Hungarian divers, but the Koreans were actually the ones who lifted it to the surface. So now, actually, we need to wait. That's the best what we can do, but I can promise that also the Korean and also the Hungarian authorities making an extremely good job and helping as fast and as much as they can.
So we can see that Hungarian divers are also doing their best. And Zoltan, we saw hundreds of Hungarians gather near the Margaret Bridge right behind you, singing the Korean folk song Arirang to mourn the loss of the South Korean victims. It was a heartbreaking as well as heartwarming to witness that. Let's hope for the best from here on out. Zoltan Szyboszegi live from Budapest for us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
In other news, ahead of June 6th Memorial Day, President Moon Jae-in met with veterans and their family members and thanked them for their service. The president said that the right Veterans Affairs is what boosts national security and increases the foundation of peace. Our Shin Se-min with more.
Speaking during a luncheon with those who have defended the nation and their family members, President Moon Jae-in said Veterans Affairs are significant, especially for a nation in desperate need of peace.
보훈이 잘 이루어질 때 국민의 안보 의식은 더욱 확고해지고 평화의 토대도 그만큼 두터워질 것입니다.
In attendance at the lunch at the top office were bereaved family members of the servicemen who sacrificed their lives in the Korean War, the Second Battle of Yeonpyeong-do Island in 2002, and the torpedo attack on the Cheonan warship in 2010. The president promised his government will do its best to treat persons of national merit and their families with appropriate respect. He said paying respect to the patriots and their family members is an act of proving the nation's value. It was the third such meeting with veterans and their close relatives since President Moon took office in 2017 and is seen as the president's way of showing appreciation to those who made sacrifices for the nation. Shortly after coming into office, the Moon administration strengthened the status of the Ministry of Patriots and expanded benefits to help veterans and their families overcome difficulties in their livelihoods. Moving forward, the president promised a nation that embraces the patriots and their families and assured that the next 100 years will be just as successful for South Korea, both economically and democratically. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
President Moon has meanwhile picked Kim Chang-soo to be the new Secretary for Unification Policy. Kim is South Korea's Deputy Chief of the Joint Inter-Korean Liaison Office and a former Secretariat of the Presidential Office's National Security Council and the Korean Council for Reconciliation and Cooperation. He'll replace Seo Ho, who became the Vice Unification Minister late last month. While various reports are arising about the whereabouts of North Korean senior officials who had been involved in nuclear talks with the U.S., South Korea's Unification Minister says he has nothing to confirm and is keeping an eye on the matter. Take a listen to what Kim Young-chol had to say at a press conference earlier today about Kim Young-chol, who was U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's counterpart at the Hanoi talks.
Kim Young-chol is keeping his post as a member of the ruling party's Politburo and the vice chairman of the party's Central Committee. But he was recently replaced by someone else as head of the United Front Department. I'm continuously paying attention to how the roles are divided.
South Korea's Chosunilbo reported last week that Kim Young-chol was sent to do hard labor, but Pyongyang state-run media reported that he accompanied leader Kim Jong-un for 2 days in a row. The minister added he has nothing to confirm on North Korea's Kim Hyok-chol, who was U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun's counterpart. CNN reported earlier today that Kim Hyok-chol is alive and in state custody, in contrast to Chosunilbo's report that he was executed. The United States is still holding a North Korean ship suspected of transporting coal for the regime. In the meantime, though, the ship it transferred the coal to is still at sea and appears to be heading for Vietnam or China. Our EG1 has more.
The bulk carrier suspected of carrying the North Korean coal transferred by the now seized vessel Wise Honest seems to have lost its place to dock. Voice of America reported Tuesday that according to a ship tracking website, Dongtan, a vessel operating under the Panama flag, changed direction away from its believed destination, Indonesia. After being rejected by the Malaysian authorities, its original destination in early May, the vessel had been anchored in nearby waters for 3 weeks until it seemed to have decided to sail towards Indonesia. This goes against the Malaysian government's orders to not leave Malaysian territorial waters while investigations were underway. The ship sailed for 2 days towards Indonesia in late May. It then stopped some 240 kilometers away, and an unnamed source quoted by VOA projected that the wait was due to a long holiday in the country, which could delay the ship from unloading the coal. But while the ship seemed to be waiting for the holiday to be over, it suddenly turned around and headed north last Friday. According to the ship tracking website, Dongtan is likely to be heading towards Vietnam or China, raising speculation that it's also been rejected by Indonesia's port authorities. This comes after Indonesia seized Wise Honest, the vessel suspected of carrying coal out from North Korea in 2018, and handed it over to the U.S. to be dealt with under U.S. and international laws. However, the coal had been released by the Indonesian government in February after it accepted an Indonesian broker's request to sell the coal, as the certification of origin showed that, quote, the coal was from Russia. A UN expert panel, however, said that the 26,500 tons of North Korean coal worth $3 million should not be sold. Meanwhile, Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security, Andrea Thompson, warned that the crackdown on illegal ship-to-ship transfers will be toughened during interviews with various media outlets. She added that this is in line with President Trump's orders to, quote, up the pressure campaign on the North. 이지원, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in hopes to meet with the 5 rival political parties and the leader of the main opposition Liberty Korea Party to speed up political affairs and resolve some pending issues. A senior presidential secretary for political affairs said the top office proposed such meetings take place on Friday the 7th before President Moon leaves for a week-long trip to Northern Europe this weekend. The main opposition party, however, asked to hold a meeting with 3 negotiating parties, to which the top office rejected the proposal and called for all 5 parties to attend. If the meeting goes ahead Friday, the leaders will discuss issues including the passage of supplementary budget bill, sending food aid to the North, and local trade circumstances amid the U.S.-China trade spat. More discouraging news for the already struggling South Korean economy. GDP actually shrank in the first quarter and by the biggest amount since the 2008 financial crisis. Our business correspondent Kim Hae-sung reports.
South Korea's GDP shrank 0.4% in the January to March period compared to the previous quarter. That's 0.1% lower than the Bank of Korea's previous estimate released in April. It's also the largest fall since the fourth quarter of 2008. On year, Korea's GDP grew 1.7%. The central bank said construction investment and exports fared worse than estimated. Local exports plunged more than 3% on a drop in shipments of semiconductors and LCDs amid ongoing U.S.-China trade tensions and slowing global demand. According to an OECD report, South Korea's exports saw the sharpest drop among the G20 countries, recording $139 billion of exports in the first quarter, down 7% on quarter.
Exports account for about half of Korea's GDP. Falling chip prices led to a drop in export in recent months. Negative quarterly growth in itself is not a crisis. We saw that in 2017 too. But the problem is it hurts sentiment. That could lower corporate investment, which in turn hurts the real economy. And the chip sector is unlikely to make a turnaround soon.
Construction investment shrank 0.8% as investment in residential building construction decreased. Facilities investment dropped 9%, driven by decreases in machinery and transportation equipment, the sharpest fall in about a decade. Private consumption went up slightly by 0.1%, and government consumption increased 0.4% on increased healthcare benefits. Real gross national income fell by 0.3% on quarter to $383 billion. The Bank of Korea said to reach its growth target of 2.5%, the local economy will have to expand around 1.3% in the second quarter and 0.9% each for the remaining 2 quarters. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
The South Korean government will provide subsidies for job seekers in the low-income bracket as they look for work. The government's plan calls for monthly payments of 500,000 won, or roughly $423 US, for a maximum of 6 months. Eligible are people aged 18 to 64 who earn less than 50% of the median income and who have been employed for at least 6 months in the 2 years before the date they apply. The government hopes to implement the scheme from July next year and have related bills passed during the National Assembly's regular session, which starts in September. The government expects the program to benefit some 350,000 people next year and 600,000 by 2022. It says this is part of efforts to foster a so-called employment safety net in line with the government's broader goal of building an inclusive nation in which everyone prospers. Trade tensions between the United States and China went up a notch after the Trump administration refuted against Beijing's policy paper on the issue published on Sunday. U.S. officials say Beijing is pursuing a blame game, which is misrepresenting the nature of trade negotiations. Our Ko Dun-hee explains.
The U.S. Trade Representative and the U.S. Treasury Department released a joint statement Monday, directly countering Beijing's argument that the trade war was started by Washington. The statement says the U.S. is disappointed by China's decision to blame the Trump administration. Washington reiterated its argument that the conflict is rooted in the unfair trade practices that Beijing has engaged in for decades. These practices, it says, have hurt American workers and businesses and led to a trade deficit last year of almost $420 billion US. The U.S. was responding to a white paper released Sunday by China's State Council Information Office, arguing that it's not China but the U.S. that's backtracked on its commitment in negotiations. Although Beijing emphasized that it's willing to work things out, Washington's response seems to mean the tensions won't ease anytime soon. Last year, the U.S. and China exchanged tariffs on around $360 billion US worth of each other's goods. From June 1st, Beijing has raised some existing tariffs to 25%, as Washington threatens new ones of its own. The ongoing trade tensions are hurting the global economy, including the United States. According to a report Monday by the Institute for Supply Management, the Purchasing Managers Index, which is an indicator of economic health in the manufacturing and service sectors, fell last month in the U.S. to its lowest in more than 2 years. There have been no talks scheduled since the last ones ended in May, and it remains to be seen whether President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping will sit down for talks when they attend the G20 Leaders Summit in Japan later this month. Ko Dun-hee, Arirang News.
The tech giants of Silicon Valley, such as Amazon and Google, could be facing investigations by regulators for possible antitrust violations. Kan Hyung-woo has the details.
The U.S. Federal Trade Commission and the Department of Justice have reportedly divided up oversight of Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google, clearing the path for possible investigations into antitrust violations. Citing anonymous sources, Reuters reports the Justice Department's Antitrust Division met with FTC officials in recent weeks and agreed to hand over the jurisdiction to the Justice Department to launch potential antitrust probes of Apple and Google. The FTC was given the authority to inspect Amazon and Facebook. While there have been no official statements from the government agencies, the latest moves, if confirmed, could be a sign of closer watches on the tech giants that have faced rising criticism over disinformation and privacy violations. The question of whether these companies violate antitrust regulations has long been the subject of debate and industry complaints. In Congress, the chairman of the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Antitrust, David Cicilline, said lawmakers are looking into the tech giants' possible anti-competitive behavior, and the committee informed the companies of the investigation plans. Cicilline added that if the House probe finds wrongdoings, lawmakers will push the Justice Department and the FTC to dig deeper. The four tech companies declined to comment on the report. With the media frenzy about possible investigations from antitrust regulators, shares in Facebook, Google, Amazon, and Apple all fell on Monday. Kan Hyung-woo, Arirang News.
Now, we're used to hearing about how millennials are addicted to social media and smartphones, but now there is a need to make way for Generation Z, whose lifestyles are even more connected. Let's get more from our Oh Soo-young, who is in the studio for us today to wrap up our series focusing on this demographic. So, Soo-young, remind us again, who exactly falls into this Generation Z?
Well, we're talking about a generation that doesn't quite know how to go offline, as they were born in the age of internet and raised with social media. So born between the mid-90s to the late noughties, Generation Z are now estimated to make up about a third of the world's population. And to better acquaint you with this digital savvy cohort, I met with Amy. Meet Amy Ton, a middle school student living in Seoul. Swiping seamlessly through multiple devices and 5 social media platforms, she does her homework, makes friends with people halfway across the world, and uploads YouTube videos on gaming.
Yeah, I would do some tutorials on some games, or I would just play them with my friends. I have some internet friends. I never ever met them. I know them through the internet, and we would video call usually.
Called digital natives, Generation Z are fast learners powered by search engines. They're multitaskers as well as natural content creators armed with video editing and social media tools.
Creating a YouTube channel, in my opinion, is an unbelievable way for students to share their talents and gain some recognition. If a student's a great singer or dancer or musician or whatever, for me, I personally see a huge avenues for students to gain fulfillment.
As they're widely exposed to news about political, social and economic problems, researchers say they're also passionate about finding solutions for the greater good.
Now, this does sound like an enterprising bunch and even more connected than the millennials, but it does beg the question, does all this constant connectivity, is it actually good for them?
Well, that's actually a topic of growing interest. While Generation Z are very confident behind the camera and quite adept at building an online personality, once you remove the screen, it gets a bit awkward.
In real life, I'm not a shy person, but I'm not able to show all of my emotions because it gets a little bit embarrassing at times. But in social media or online, they would not be able to really see me. So I'm able to be more comfortable. If I have something serious to say, I would never do it in person because it is embarrassing for me, and I'm really used to now texting.
Most members of Generation Z are so used to talking to the screen that eye contact can feel disconcerting.
It's desensitizing them. They're not very social when it comes to face to face. A lot of kids are very shy, but again, once they put those headphones on or behind the keyboard, they can socialize with whoever.
Also, as we witness through the series, Generation Z rely on emojis to convey their emotions, and a growing number prefer to share short video clips on the spot, rather than catch up with their friends offline. But this means they're always scrolling and checking for the latest updates, engendering what they call FOMO, or the fear of missing out.
If everyone else is referencing some online thing that happened, whether it be something that happened in your friendship group or, an online, viral trend that's spread, and they're not in the loop, they feel like they've missed out. And so social validation has started to be connected to online use in some ways.
Now, it does sound like they're under a whole lot of pressure compared to previous generations that haven't had this kind of experience. Yeah, so there are differing experiences between the two generations, right?
There's a lot of pressure on them, and aside from the pressure of having to keep up with their peers constantly on social media, Generation Z, according to various analysts, are feeling increasingly anxious and depressed because they feel lonely and crave human connections.
But they're reaching out on social media to fill that void of connection. They want that connection. And if they get a response and they get people to reach back to them, they feel better. But when they don't, they can feel even worse and even more disconnected.
as the boundary between the virtual and physical worlds continue to blur for Generation Z. Researchers say that it's critical that parents and educators help them establish regular face-to-face contact as well as offline relationships in order to help them overcome this paradoxical implication of being broadly connected but feeling more disconnected than ever.
Yeah, indeed. And we do hope that they don't get too addicted to these internets or social media or their smartphones. Soo-young, it has been intriguing to listen to this series about Generation Z. Thank you very much. Excellent reporting as always.
Thank you for having me.
To boost Korea's exports of consumer goods, a global exhibition was held on Monday and Tuesday this week. Cosmetics and fashion items were in the spotlight thanks to the growing global popularity of Korean culture. Our Yoon Jung-min reports.
Among the many products on display at the Consumer Goods Showcase Korea 2019, fashion items like summer dresses and cosmetics like color makeup caught many buyers' attention. The showcase aims to help businesses make forays into global markets, and this year's event in Seoul attracted some 1,000 Korean companies and 580 foreign buyers from 63 countries.
We would like to be the company who could dedicate to not only increasing its sales, but also to let them to go overseas and be on the world.
The Trade Ministry says some $27.7 billion of Korean cosmetics, fashion items, and household products were sold overseas in 2018 on the back of the increasing popularity of the Korean wave, including K-pop and K-dramas. The showcase included exhibitions, conferences, and one-on-one counseling for businesses and job seekers. During the event, influencers on social networks from China, Russia, and Latin America set up studios within the e-commerce exhibition to promote Korean goods through online channels.
We're collaborating with Kotra, so we can do that, like working together in different fields like beauty, fashion, food, and showing Korean companies and the potential they have for exportation for the world, for international interest, buyers, or viewers as well.
Amid slowing exports and growing global uncertainties, the Consumer Goods Showcase Korea 2019 hopes to reinvigorate exports by serving as a bridge between companies and buyers. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
LA Dodgers pitcher Yuhyun-jin has been named the National League Pitcher of the Month for May, becoming the second South Korean pitcher to win the award since baseball legend Park Chan-ho won it over 20 years ago. Our Lee Seung-jae has the story.
When South Korea's Yuhyun-jin opted to sign a one-year qualifying offer to stay with the Dodgers this past offseason, he was out to prove his past injuries were behind him, and he could still be one of the best left-handed pitchers in baseball. So far, he's proved that and more. After posting up virtually unhittable numbers in May, Ryu has been named the National League's Pitcher of the Month, becoming just the second South Korean pitcher to receive the award since Park Chan-ho in July 1998. In May, the lefty made 6 starts, going 5-0 with an ERA of 0.59, striking out 36 batters and walking just 3 across 45 2/3 innings. During that period, he also produced a streak of 32 scoreless innings. While many had Ryu winning the National League Player of the Month honors, Pittsburgh Pirates first baseman Josh Bell would take that honor. Nonetheless, the South Korean is on pace for a historic season as he's currently 8-1 with a league-leading ERA of 1.48. More impressive has been his control with a strikeout-to-walk ratio of 13.8, the best in Major League Baseball. If all goes well, LA Dodgers manager Dave Roberts, who will lead the National League team during the All-Star Game in Cleveland this summer, might name him the starting pitcher in what would be a first for a South Korean. But with numbers as good as Ryu, he could also become the first South Korean pitcher to ever win a Cy Young Award, an award given to the top pitchers in the league at the end of the season. For Ryu, it'll be one game at a time as he looks to replicate the numbers he had in May, again in June. Attempting to lock in his 9th win of the season, Ryu will be stepping onto the mound once again on Tuesday night, local time, as he takes on the Dodgers' division rivals, the Arizona Diamondbacks. 이승재, Arirang News.
The International Olympic Committee has welcomed North Korea's willingness to field joint Korean teams for the 2020 Tokyo Summer Games. According to Radio Free Asia on Tuesday, an IOC spokesperson said the organization is delighted to see sports help drive the momentum for peace between the two Koreas. Pyongyang's Vice Sports Minister Won Gi-do had said an inter-Korean team would be in line with what the people of the two Koreas want and also conforms to the spirit of the Olympics. The two Koreas plan to field joint teams in basketball, field hockey, rowing and judo. South Korea's biggest automaker, Hyundai Motor, is doing brisk business in the US, posting an increase in sales for a 10th consecutive month there. The gains were the result of the company's highest ever sales of SUVs, which jumped a whopping 25% in May compared to the same month last year. Hyundai says it sold more than 66,000 units in the US last month, a 2% increase on year. South Korea's under-20 football team will face longtime rivals Japan in the round of 16 at the Under-20 World Cup in Poland. The last time the two sides met in the competition was in 2003, when Japan beat South Korea 2-1. The knockout match kicks off at Lublin Stadium at 12:30 a.m. Wednesday, Korea time. The winner will take on either Senegal or Nigeria in the quarter-finals on Saturday. K-pop boy band NCT 127 has ranked 11th on the Billboard 200 album chart with their new mini-album, NCT 127 We Are Superhuman. This marks the second time for the band to enter the Billboard 200, and the only K-pop group to chart higher than them are BTS. We Are Superhuman also debuted at #1 on the Billboard World Albums chart. That has been your 3-minute news flash.
Sweltering heat across much of the nation today.
Yes, which means heatwave advisories for some areas. Let's get more from our Michelle Park at the Weather Centre. Michelle.
Hi guys, it was especially hot in the southeastern provinces where the mercury marked over 34 degrees Celsius in Daegu. Now more heat wave advisories are expected to be issued as the scorching weather continues into tomorrow. And as for the mornings, the nation will range between 17 to 20 degrees Celsius, so we're waking up at 18 degrees Celsius. Now Seoul's daily high is expected to stay in the upper 20s tomorrow, whereas Daegu and Gyeongju will reach high up to 34 and 35 degrees. Heavy rainstorm is expected on Thursday. Now, it will start from the southern parts of the country before tracking its way to the whole country by Friday. And checking out the weather forecast in Budapest, where searches are still underway for victims of the boat collision. The current weather won't hamper the search job, but the rain is in the forecast for tomorrow until Thursday. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That will wrap it up for this edition of Arirang News.
We thank you as always for watching.